All right, hey folks, it's Faz here from Faz Lifts. So today I want to give you guys a practical framework for how to implement variety in your training for strength. First of all, thanks for making it onto my channel. If you have any comments about the video, any questions, please pop them down below. I'd love to hear from you guys. And let's crack on with the video. Okay, so now just some context for the video. The use of variety to improve your power lifts is vital if you're not built for that lift. So for lifts which you are well suited to, like me, I was always suited to the deadlift. I could pound away at the deadlift and just get better and better. You guys are going to have one or two lifts that you're not that great at. Okay, so you might not be built to bench. Many people aren't. Okay, you might have longer limbs, for example, and benching just becomes a very unnatural, awkward movement. Now, for that reason, you might need other lifts to help to build up the musculature associated with the bench press to enable it to look like a better movement. Like my deadlift always looked pretty good, but I had to work for years to get my bench and squat to the point where they even looked reasonable. So that's kind of what I want to discuss today. If we look at your prototypical greatest powerlifters of all time, like your Ed Cohen and stuff like that, guys like Ed are basically built for all three lifts. You know, it was rumored that Bob Bednarski from the US, who was a heavyweight Olympic lifter in the 60s, who won like gold medals at the Olympics, it was rumored that he pretty much did the same routine from a novice to advanced. You know, so right from the first couple of years that he stepped foot into the gym to the point where he was winning Olympic gold medals, he did the same routine. He didn't have to change. He was just built to lift, and he could just pound away at the snatch and clean and jerk for years and just get better and better and better and better at them. For most of us, it's not really that easy. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today. So in terms of some general principles, this is going to detail what an off season for a powerlifter kind of would look like in one lift. So some general principles. The further out you are, you're targeting weaker points, and the closer to a contest, you have more specificity. The further out you're building, closer you're testing. So in terms of the top-down principles to begin with, you want to find variations where you're weak. This is very reminiscent of West Side Barbell principles. Find variations of the lift that you're weak in and get stronger at those. Now, typically, those are going to involve awkward positioning, perhaps different grip widths. Touch and go tends to be less stressful for the majority of the time because you can get more reps, so that's good. Higher rep ranges allow you to build. Lower rep ranges allow you to test a little bit better. So further out from a contest, you're going to be doing more variations, less specificity to the lifts, probably more touch and go stuff, probably higher rep ranges, and close to a contest, you want to be introducing lower reps, more specific variations. More than likely, you're going to start pausing your lifts, at least doing them to competition standard, and you're going to be using lower reps to get used to the heavier weight. So that's what your entire season should look like, and it should allow you to keep building in the off season, especially the musculature associated with your weaker lifts. So I wanted to give you guys a case study to help to visualize an example of what I'm talking about. I wanted this video to be very specific and very sort of hands-on practical. So I'm giving you a case study of an early intermediate lifter who's a tricep and delt dominant bench presser. So let's crack on and have a look at what the 4 mesocycles would look like. And just before I talk about this, I'll preface this by saying that you've probably heard of phase potentiation from Mike Israetel. This is essentially like that. Each phase will potentiate the next phase. I just do things a little bit differently to Mike. So mesocycle 1 would be your absolute weakest variation. This is as far away from a contest style bench as possible. Also, you're typically going to run the reps nice and high. And that means because the weight you're using is quite low relative to your competition style bench press, you could do this lift as often as twice a week, even doing it really, really hard, like doing it all out. You could go as often as twice a week because the nature of the lift puts you in a very disadvantageous position and you're using higher reps. Now, I would still recommend practicing the contest style bench press, possibly doing it for light work, but I would recommend the bulk of your efforts go into this really difficult variation. Now, over the course of 2 or 3 months in your first mesocycle, you may well see 10 to 20 kilos of progress on the lift, and that would be acceptable, I think. and you should see visible improvements in the area that this lift targets. So mesocycle 1, far out from a competition, high rep ranges, very non-specific, but builds up the areas which are necessary to build up for a big bench press. All right, next, mesocycle 2, we're getting a little bit more specific now. So we go to the close grip bench press. We get off the incline, a regular close grip bench press, and the repetition ranges are as high as 8. So maybe not 8 to 12, but still relatively high for a powerlifter. So we're building with that high volume. And that's really important to understand. I never built my strength in the off season with lower volume or lower rep ranges. No, not at all. Perhaps lower rep ranges, but certainly not lower volume. This means you can still hit this lift maybe once or twice a week. If you have to move down to once a week, then that's fine. Perhaps pick a different variation to do the second time a week and still continue practicing the contest style bench light. So you may well be benching as often as 3 times a week, but as a powerlifter, that's probably quite reasonable. And carry this on for another couple of months. Again, some more improvement would see better assistance lifts, but also visible improvements in the areas which are responsible for a big bench press. So mesocycle 3 out of 4, we go to the actual contest grip bench press. So now we are maybe anywhere between 4 to 6 months away from the beginning of the off season. So we are 4 to 6 months deep into the off season. And at this stage, this is when we start to practice the contest grip bench press. We're still keeping it touch and go to allow us to have higher volumes. Okay, most people can typically do more work with touch and go. It's a little bit less stressful, and we are still keeping the rep ranges as high as 8. We would still do this once or twice a week. And again, if we had to drop down to once a week on this, we might choose a different variation. We might even go back to the close grip incline for the second variation of the week. And I would still at this stage recommend keeping a hand in on contest style benching, perhaps done light. We continue this for another couple of months. So by this point, we would be anywhere between 6 to 9 months into the off season. And what we've done is we've done building variations. We've increased the size of our chest, delts, triceps. We've done a lot of building work, a ton of volume, which builds all the musculature associated with the bench press. Now, at this point, the 4th mesocycle is the peaking mesocycle. And this is what we're going to run prior to our competition or our testing day. This is when we do the contest grip pause bench press, and this is a specific peaking block of 2-3 months where we would be working the contest grip bench press once or twice a week, more than likely aiming to do it twice and aiming at practicing singles, doubles, and triples to really peak all that strength we've been building for the last 6 to 9 months. So if we look at the sort of summary of this, build, 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 test. This is an important concept to sear into your mind. You don't want to be testing all year round. Go into the gym, test my bench. No, you don't even want to be using that to build your bench all year round if you are not suited to the lift. Now, if you're a natural born bench presser, it's a different matter, but this case study is for somebody who wants to use variation to build up the areas of their body which are associated with a good bench press. This is one way of doing it. This is how I implement variation. Go from the easier variations and the higher rep ranges and the less specific work over the course of 6 to 9 months or more, move towards more specific variations till you get to the point where you're hitting the actual contest bench, paused for singles, doubles, triples, and that should be the final mesocycle. If you do this and you're able to work hard right the way through, I would expect an intermediate lifter to come out of this at least 20 kilos stronger by the end, because they're just pounding those musculature that is associated with a big bench press over and over for the entire off season on variations which are easy on the body, easy on the joints, and they're able to build up the areas. I think that would be a very successful cycle for somebody, and that's typically how I structured my own lifting when I was powerlifting. I've given you one variation, one example of one lift here. But there are infinite number of ways to figure this out. So you could do the same thing for deadlifts, the same thing for squats, just building up the areas that you need to build up, utilizing variation, high volumes, high variation, high repetition ranges in the off season, moving over to lower volumes, peaking volumes, low repetitions, more specific lifts in the close to the contest day or whenever you're going to max out. But that is generally how I would do things. And just to go over some misconceptions. Strength is not built via low volume and low reps. That's not how you build strength. You test strength, you peak strength that way, but you don't build strength that way. You build strength. Anyone who's built a lot of strength has done a lot of work to build that strength. You don't build great strength from low volume typically. And if you did, well, you're one of the lucky ones. You're probably well suited to the lift. You build great strength, especially if you're a natural as well. You build great strength by doing a lot of work in the lift. To do a lot of work, you've got to target the variations that you can actually hit often. Odds are, if you're not particularly built to squat and you try to squat very often, it'll be a disaster. Hence, this is why stuff like this is useful. It's the same with the bench press. If you're not built to bench press, it'll probably wreck your shoulders if you try to do a lot of bench pressing before you've developed a lot of size. Whereas stuff like this can help, and it is how your regular average person who's not built for a particular lift can get more than average, can actually be super be a good lifter. All right, folks, I'm going to call it there. If you've made it this far and you haven't yet subscribed, please do subscribe. Also, if you want to know how to implement a lot of this, I have a method which reflects this style of lifting down in the description. It's called my Tactician Book and is a powerlifting specific program which you can purchase for a small amount. So go check that out if you are interested in this type of thing. And yes, I will speak to you all next time. Hope you enjoyed